The first scream shattered the silence of the night, then another, more desperate, echoing through the dense fog. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. Yet as Daniel stepped out of his truck onto the empty highway, the chilling wails sent ice through his veins. The road was abandoned, a lonely stretch of pavement surrounded by a dense, impenetrable forest. The air was thick with moisture, and a creeping fog slithered through the trees, swallowing the world in eerie silence. The wails were distant, yet they seemed to come from all directions at once, reverberating in his ears like a ghostly cry for help. Daniel had always dismissed ghost stories as nonsense. A hardened trucker with years on the road, he had heard his share of urban legends: phantom hitchhikers, haunted rest stops, shadowy figures lurking in rearview mirrors. But none of that had ever fazed him, until now. Standing in the oppressive darkness, his breath coming in short gasps, Daniel realized something was terribly wrong. The screams weren't human, nor were they the cries of any animal he recognized. They wove through the fog like an eerie, discordant melody, each note scratching at the edges of his sanity. Was someone in danger, or was something lurking in the unseen shadows watching him? If Daniel wanted answers, he had to push forward. But some roads are not meant to be traveled at night. Some cries are not meant to be answered. Daniel Carter was a veteran long-haul trucker, accustomed to lonely nights on desolate highways. Highway 13 was one of his regular routes, notorious for its eerie silence and the unsettling stories associated with it. The road carved through miles of dense forest, the trees on either side pressing in like silent sentinels. The night was unusually dark, the moon a faint sliver behind a veil of thick clouds. The fog had rolled in quickly, reducing visibility to mere feet. His headlights struggled to pierce the murk, casting ghostly shadows that flickered and danced. As he neared mile marker 237, his truck's radio crackled with static. Then through the distortion, a voice, faint but distinct, whispered, "Turn back." A chill ran down his spine. He adjusted the dial, but the voice had vanished, replaced by the familiar hum of dead air. He shook his head. It was just interference. It had to be. Then he heard the screams. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard, long, wailing cries that sent an icy dread curling in his gut. He slammed the brakes, his truck skidding slightly before coming to a stop. The road ahead was obscured by the thick fog. Then he saw it. A figure stood in the middle of the highway, barely visible through the mist. A woman, barefoot. Her tattered nightgown billowed slightly as though caught in an unfelt breeze. She stood with her back to him, unmoving. Daniel's throat went dry. Something about her posture, her stillness, set his nerves on edge. He reached for his flashlight, his fingers trembling. Stepping out onto the pavement, he called out, "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman didn't respond. The wailing had stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The silence pressed in around him, thick and suffocating. Then she turned. Her face was hollow. Her skin stretched too tightly over her bones, her eyes sunken and devoid of life. But it was her mouth that made Daniel's stomach lurch. It wasn't there. Where her lips should have been, there was only a gaping black void. Daniel stumbled back, his flashlight flickering wildly. The woman took a step forward, then another. The scream that erupted from her mouth was not human. Panic surged through Daniel as he bolted back to his truck, fumbling with the door handle. He yanked it open, scrambled inside, and slammed it shut. His hand shook as he jammed the key into the ignition. The truck roared to life, but in the instant his headlights flashed forward. The woman was gone. The fog thickened, curling like grasping fingers around the vehicle. Daniel's breathing was ragged as he floored the gas pedal. The truck lurched forward, tires screeching against the wet asphalt. Then his headlights caught something ahead. A wrecked car, half hidden in the trees. The windshield was shattered. The driver's side door hung open. Blood smeared the seat. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears as he climbed out once more, his flashlight beam cutting through the fog. His foot nudged something on the ground, an ID card. His own face stared back at him. Daniel Carter. His heart nearly stopped. This wasn't possible. A cold breath whispered against his ear. You never left. The scream erupted again, deafening and all-consuming. Daniel turned, but the woman was right there, her hollow eyes locking onto his. Her skeletal fingers shot forward, clawing into his chest, ice-cold pain searing through him. Darkness swallowed him whole. A passing trucker later reported an abandoned rig near mile marker 237. No sign of the driver. Just an old, wrecked sedan buried in the trees, one that hadn't moved in years. No footprints, no blood. Just a faint echo in the night. A scream. Month later, a rookie trucker passed the same stretch of road. The radio crackled. Through the static, a voice, faint but distinct, whispered, "Turn back." Then came the screams. Some roads never forget. Some screams never fade.